Reading it this morning, we noticed in section B, it talks about just abolishing that time frame from 8 p.m. until 8 a.m. Our concern is that if we can just add something that says unless otherwise posted or restricted, because we do have metered areas that are restricted year-round, for example, in between the library and the city-county building, and then on State Street because of safety concerns that the police have brought up. And then we have 15 to 20 other locations throughout the city that the meter parking is signed stating that after hours it's a 15-minute time frame or a 5-minute time frame. And by just adding that will protect that. But if we don't, then it will cause further confusion and frustration for people.
Erin.
Thanks for paying attention to this. This is the kind of thing where I could see if you weren't paying attention, we could pass something like this. Next year, we were wishing someone like you was paying attention and had helped us give the insight that would make this better. It's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Now might be also a good time to mention that the administration has forwarded to the council, and I think you just received it today. Is that correct? Yes. The updates to the overall parking ordinance that we are going to be discussing once that gets placed on your agenda. And so some of these items might be strange timing-wise, and this is something that we could incorporate into the overall parking ordinance changes at the same time, if you're amenable to that. And I think the other issue that you're going to be discussing next could also be a potential candidate to be rolled into the overall parking ordinance at that time, doing it all at once as opposed to piecemeal.
Council members, are you comfortable with that, including it to the transmittal that we received it today?
Can I just?
Yes, Cindy.
We've gone back and forth again to the point where we might become schizophrenic soon, because when we put them all together, then it dies of its own weight because there's so many different components and it's so difficult to deal with. So in an attempt to scoot us forward a little bit, Allison has broken them down into chunks. So maybe we can do a combination where you vote separately on each of the components of it, but they're consolidated in one ordinance or something. Just so you're aware, that's why they're separate right now, is because we failed with the grouping last round.
So what you're saying is that we could approve or deny these changes to be included in the new ordinance change?
Yes, you could do that, and then since they have done a consolidated package, when we bring those to you, we'll try to break them up by issue so that you can do straw polls on each one and go from there. It was just, when you're just talking about them all together, we failed at this a few times.
We lose good substance.
Yeah.
Just by way of information, my understanding from previous versions of the transmittal that I saw is that there will actually be some additional changes to the parking ordinance. Most of them are cleanups, but there will be a couple, I believe, that have policy implications, correct?
Mm-hmm.
That is correct, but I definitely respect and hear what Cindy's saying. I mean, there, if it does tend to get diluted and some things get lost if you include everything. So we're willing to work with you either way, whatever you want to do.
Well, that being said, we hate to make things look less important, so let's go ahead with these and then we'll include them with the ordinance that we received, the transmittal. So
Okay.
straw poll the issues on this already.
I'm just asking Lisa to comment on whether that will work from their point of view for this particular
Yeah, I
item.
might want to refer to Jason for a timing issue. So yes, when it gets adopted, then we would have to revise the transmittal that we've sent to you, but we could include that.
I'm just talking about including it in the transmittal,
Okay.
the changes that we're discussing today.
So it would be a
Okay, we can do that as well.
Does that make sense?
That is kind of what Cindy was referring to though, right?
Do it together.
Right.
Okay.
We'll work with her.
Okay.
Sounds good. We will work it out. These are not huge changes, and we'll definitely work it out.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, just to clarify, so on the previous item, that is actually scheduled for action tonight. Would you like to postpone that?
Well, I mean, we voted on it, so we might as well straw poll it as well. Do you want to?
You straw polled it.
We did, and it
Yes.
was unanimous. Do you want to do it tonight, or you want to wait until the rest of the items are brought to us? Any preference?
No public hearing.
No public hearing is required.
I think might as well just include it with everything else.
Okay.
Great,
Does that work?
it does.
Okay. Great.
Thank you. You ready to move on to the next item?
Yep.
So the final of these three regards the streets for storage or 48-hour rule. The existing ordinance doesn't allow vehicles, including motorhomes, boats, trailers, to remain parked on city streets for longer than 48 hours. And the idea behind that, and Isaac could certainly speak more to this, is to avoid the appropriation of public space by people who would like to live in their trailer, for example, on the street, for using them for different sorts of activities, including business activities, and then also to help detect abandoned and stolen property. So this is a rule that's been in place in the city in the past. And again, in the 2014 discussion, several council members mentioned the idea that it might be good to extend or eliminate this rule as part of an effort to incentivize people or give them more encouragement to leave their car parked while they look at other forms of public transit. So the question is whether the council would like to consider a longer period. There's a little bit additional information in the staff report regarding the fact that the council office and parking, because Isaac has sent the data, does receive complaints from residents about cars being parked, vehicles being parked on the street, stored on the street. So they do receive several thousand per year of these kinds of complaints. On the flip side of that, or rather, in addition to that, I guess they receive comments suggesting that the time period should actually be shortened rather than left at 48 hours. The council office has received comments and complaints in the past from people who have left their cars or other vehicles and have returned from a trip, returned from a period of incapacitation, and found them towed. So we have received comments on both sides of the issue, and the question is how you would like to resolve it, if at all.
Yes, Aaron.
The last piece that you mentioned was why I started, I think Luke Garrett and I started this conversation a while ago. And there is that desire to encourage people to feel comfortable taking transit and leaving their vehicle, not having to manage moving a vehicle. But I think that the reasons that we have that ordinance in the first place are really valid, good reasons that you listed. And I don't think that they are no longer applicable. But the idea that, and I've heard, and maybe you guys have heard from constituents too, that I had a constituent whose wife had a baby, there was complications, they were at the hospital, and the last thing they needed was their minivan towed when they got home from the hospital 5 days later. These things happen. People go on vacation, they don't have parking. I wish that there were a way that we could allow some kind of exemption, and I'm reminded of the mayor's,
In lieu of payment.
in lieu of payment, yeah, the amnesty. And that it seems like there are occasions that people need that kind of amnesty where it could be concise enough that one wanting to live in their RV on a chosen block in a neighborhood couldn't just continuously call in amnesty so that they can do that. If anyone has input on how we make some kind of loophole on purpose for those occasions, that's really what I was getting at.
Mr. Chair, is there any way the city has right now to track certain things like that? If someone were to call in and say on 7th West and 8th South, there's a blue minivan, I'll be leaving there for 72 hours because of this and this and this. Is there any way to track that at this point?
Yes, there is.
Easily?
So these type of incidents are complaint-based. So, we don't go down the street and put a notice on cars. So usually a resident calls, says, hey, this vehicle's been here for 48, 72 up to 5 days.
Mhm.
And then we go out, and that's when we actually lay a 48-hour notice. And that's us giving them an additional 48 hours to do something with the vehicle. And then if it's not dealt with by that point, that's when it's moved from the block. So in actuality, you know, most of these vehicles have already been there longer than 48 hours when we come upon them. There are several incidences where, you know, we have repeat offenders, motorhomes that'll, you know, are broke down on the street, we'll have it removed, either by us, police, or the health department. And, you know, a month later, it's back out on the street again.
So
Same-
if we
dealing with the same thing again.
I'm just thinking, if we left this expectation in place of 48 hours, is there a way for somebody to proactively say, I need to have an exemption from this for some amount of time? The city could trace that so that if there was a complaint, it'd be flagged in the system and say, well, we do have an exemption for that vehicle for this time, whatever it is.
Our dispatch does track that. We log all the 48-hour notices, and then on a regular basis, we have people call and say, hey, look, we're working on it, but it's going to be until Thursday that I can get the vehicle moved because it's broke down. We record that in the complaint database and give them that extension. But it's based on them being proactive in what their situation is.
That's what I'm thinking. Is there a way for a citizen to be proactive and say, I forecast this is going to err in the middle of it? We have an expectation, but you have an exception.
Yeah, council member, I appreciate the discussion because I think it is important to distinguish between whether or not there is a desire to change the ordinance, the rule about 48-hour streets for storage, and whether or not we want to explore some kind of program that would help people be proactive in that way. And so, you know, I think the ordinance change before you is asking whether or not you want to change the ordinance. And I would say that our data that we have collected and the practices that we have in place are, yeah, they seem to be commensurate with the amount of complaints that we get. So,
Okay. I like the concept of keeping the expectation of the ordinance in place, but finding ways to help folks have exemptions, essentially, legal ones.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that as well. I think that, you know, 48 hours, and you notify them, give them another 48, that's 96 hours. So if you're comfortable with keeping the ordinance as is with some sort of looking at a program for amnesty or you know, some sort of give back on the issue for those that are hard up or have extenuating circumstances.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about, you know, when I go out of town and you can call if you take the newspaper, you can, you know, have it paused for a week or 2 weeks or however long you need. Is there a way for us to do that with this on-street parking as well? So if somebody's going to have a baby, they can call in and say, I'm going to leave my car parked for 5 days. Is there a way for us to maybe work around that in some way and allow people some sort of freedom to park their car on their street while they're out of town or out of commission for some reason?
yeah, I mean, I think that we would definitely be amenable to looking at some kind of program that accommodates life circumstances for people.
Can I
We'd be
get
willing to look
more
at that.
specific on that? Does our current technology that enforcement officers use have the capacity to attach notices to license plate numbers so that someone could call proactively as opposed to responding to a ticket to say, this license plate number,
Yeah.
here's my name and my address, I'm going out of town for 2 weeks?
I think that
Do we
the
have that
technology
capacity?
definitely can accommodate that. In the current configuration, I believe we would have to, Isaac, you can chime in here, but I think we would have to make some modifications for this specific exemption. But the technology exists where we can enter into a database vehicles that are exempt for whatever reason.
I mean, doesn't it seem fair if you and Kyle go out of town for a week and you want to leave a car parked in front of your house that you ought to be able to call in and say, please don't ticket me?
Because my neighbors report
Right.
all day.
Well, and also take into account other things like registration and existing laws so that you could have ways to make sure that it's not just somebody calling in for exemption for something that's broken down and sitting there for weeks.
We wouldn't have a way to validate that, actually. Perhaps we could put some kind of limit on the amount of times you can access the amnesty in a calendar year or per vehicle or
Yeah, and I
something.
mean, this is part of the exploration process with this kind of a program. I think that we would discover some of the things that you're talking about. You know, we still would be allowed to ticket, for example, if your registration is out of date, or, you know, we would have to explore all of those options and possibilities to make sure that we're not violating our own ordinance while accommodating this program.
So I'd just like to request that in the exploration process that there be, I know we're getting into paint colors a little, but that there be a database so that we can track a vehicle's use of the process, and over whatever course of time we are going to designate as how often one can, and that we also attempt, at least in the draft, to define the maximum amount of time one can request exemption for. And you would know,
While keeping the
Probably.
same parking ordinance of 48 hours.
yes,
That's a straw poll, right, Aaron?
that was a straw
Okay,
poll.
everyone that's in favor of that?
Just clarify again, so just keep it in place right now. Are there addendums now that she mentioned that we want to put in, or just?
With the intent of looking into
intent,
with the
okay.
program. Correct. So thumbs up if you're in favor of that.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
quick question. Are you talking about a legislative intent, or are you asking staff to draft an ordinance and work with
For
public
the
services,
program.
obviously?
I think we were going to work together. Isn't that what you
Yes.
were talking about? It's
To
just-
draft an ordinance?
so.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's great. Okay. Is that it on your time ordinance? Number
Yes,
6?
that's it on parking for tonight.
Okay, well, we have a 15-minute break, and then we're going to take it. We'll come back in 15 minutes at 4:10 to discuss number 7, the procurement appeals process amendments. Nick Tarbett, who is with
Mr.
the-
Chair, are
Yes.
we doing item number
Did I
7?
skip number 7?
Procurement appeals
Oh, yeah,
process?
because it's not that, oh, and I shouldn't say that. Yes, item number 7, sorry, my paper was flipped over. Procurement appeals process amendments. Ben Lutke, and we have Jason Oldroyd from the city attorneys, as well as,
Brian Hemsley, City's Chief Procurement Officer.
and Mary Beth.
Mary Beth.
Thank you. All right, Ben, who's going to lead us out on this? You or Chris?
Jason's going to start
Okay.
with just a quick overview of some of the benefits that this would provide the city.
Okay, sounds good. So what we have in this instance is fairly recently, the state legislature amended the state statutes in a way that permitted the city to gain access to their protest and appeals processes. Typically, we've had our own process. In some instances, it gets kind of unwieldy for the city because it requires a lot of effort and work on our part. It's also something that leaves us open to allegations of self-interest. Sometimes parties that don't get the result they want have alleged that the city has been too involved in the process and has its own interests. A couple benefits that come with this new system, besides taking that additional step away from the process and letting the state processes control the ultimate outcome, is that it also eliminates the threat of litigation. In this situation, the state's process is run through the Utah Court of Appeals. There wouldn't be any sense in then having a protester who feels that they got a decision they didn't like trying to start a new case back at the district court. Also, in addition with that, there are bonds and cost recovery methods that are in place with the state statutes that deter frivolous lawsuits. Essentially, if a protester wants to appeal the procurement processes of the city, they would have to provide a bond, and the winner of the ultimate appeals process then is entitled to costs and fees. So unless a protest has genuine merit, a protester would be reluctant to pursue a frivolous action. As far as the process itself goes, the state process would be a situation where after the city has issued its solicitation and come to a decision, if a protest is filed, then that protest goes through first the city procurement official, who has an opportunity to investigate and make a determination as to whether that protest has merit. If the protest, if the city official determines that the protest does not have merit, then the protester has an opportunity to appeal that matter. That appeal would go to the state, let me make sure I get it right. It is the State Procurement Policy Board. They then create an appeal panel that would consist of 3 of their members. After they make their decision, then either party has the ability to appeal that to the Utah Court of Appeals for a final decision. So the process runs through the state system. It really adds a layer of separation between the city and the process itself. And we also have the state's stamp of authority with regard to these bonds and these costs, recovery of costs and fees, which is something that it's arguable as to whether the city could impose that of its own volition. But if we have the state saying we can do that, then that's something that we wouldn't need to argue or worry about. Do you have any questions regarding the process itself, or pros and cons?
Doesn't look like it.
All right.
So I guess I have one question, and that is, are there any other municipalities that have changed their ordinance to accommodate this?
Not that I'm aware of at this time. It was presented by the changes that were made the last go-round to the state code were presented by one of the assistant attorney generals at one of the municipal attorney conferences I attended. And there were several other municipalities that expressed interest in it, but I haven't seen anything that's gone all the way through the process yet. We would probably be the first.
Okay, and we haven't heard from the Utah League of Cities and Towns or anything like that?
I think they were in favor of the amendments when they went through. I know we assisted the state in amending their procedures in a way that would make it possible for cities to access that.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Okay, well, that was pretty simple. We'll
All right,
put it on
thank you.
and get it ready to vote on, so.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, now we're on to item number 8, the rezone of 854 West Hoyt Place. We have Nick Tarbett from the council office, as well as Jonathan Goetz. And, I'm sorry, your name?
Michaela.
Thank you. It slipped my mind. All right, Ben. Where's Michaela going to lead us off? Tell us where we're at again with this.
JP will lead us off, but I just want to say we also have the applicant, Dave Robinson, is here, and he's asked to have the standard 5 minutes that the applicant,
Great.
the council
Does he
gives
want to
him
have his
after the
time after?
briefing. Yep.
Okay.
So just a quick summary of this proposal, this petition that's we're looking at. It's a rezone at Hoyt Place, which is located about 1,200 feet north of the Jackson Euclid track station. More importantly, it's about a similar distance from the Red Iguana. Tracks on North Temple, there's a lot of amenities around there. Anyway, Hoyt Place is accessed by 900 West. It's a private street that heads east. This location is identified in the North Temple Boulevard Master Plan area, specifically the 8th West Station area, as an area that supports including higher density single-family housing. The applicants requested on behalf of 6 property owners a rezone to SR3, which matches a higher density single-family housing type. The Planning Commission recommended this unanimously to the City Council, and the rezone is from R17 and primarily R15. There's one R17 lot proposed to be changed. As far as the public process, the applicant's been to the Community Council multiple times. I think a few of you have been to those meetings. The Community Council voted in support of changing this zone. Several people from the public spoke at the Planning Commission hearing. No one was opposed. 2 people supported it. 3 people wanted to speak, but there was no opposition to the rezone itself. The primary concerns with the rezone were was the actual development, and there is no development proposed at this time. It's simply the rezone. Any development that would go in would be subject to a plan development process. Plan development would introduce another public process, community council hearing, public hearing noticing to the surrounding property owners. So it would add that extra layer. So if none of you have any questions about that, I'm sure the applicant's anxious to speak.
Are there any questions for staff and council staff?
So I see that this was just the applicant is Mr. Robinson and not the city staff or the administration.
Correct.
If you were to rezone this in accordance with the North Temple Grand Boulevard Master Plan, would you choose the SR3 zone as the preferred rezone?
I believe we would. I mean, that's what the SR3 is written for. If you read the language of the purpose of the SR3 district, it's intended for mid-block areas like this. So yeah, that would likely be the chosen zone.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions before we invite the petitioner up? All right, Dave, come on up. You've got 5 minutes.
So what we call Hoyt Place is a really good example of what we're seeing around the city, especially on the west side for inner block infill development. As you can see, there are multiple parcels. If you look at the top right, they had signed on initially with everyone else. When the staff report came out, that had been left out. It wasn't a big issue for us because we knew that the one in the center, they want to be included, but they did not make the deadline, and so we need to bring that back in. What we really want to see is a general plan for all of these landowners, because individually it is very prohibitive for them to go in and develop. For example, if you take one of those parcels, by the time you run an alley in your homes, there's just not enough room. And so you have to do a combination of the parcels. And we see this, like I said, in multiple areas of the city. The city actually has the infill development ordinance, which is the SR3. And so we are very much in favor of applying the SR3 to this particular development. There are some real challenges with this site. For example, for whatever reason, the city has allowed homes to be built facing a street, which is a dirt road, and there are not adequate utilities through there. And so the expenses coming into this development are going to be quite high. Also, when you only have one access point, for fire code, you can go up to 30 homes. And so when people in the neighborhood say, oh, well, you're going to turn this into apartment buildings, the ordinance really doesn't allow that. And also, it's really monitored naturally by one access point. And so we have laid this out for single-family homes, and it actually comes right up to the 30 units. And we think it's going to be a fantastic development. Make sure we have connectivity to the neighborhood and to public transportation and such. So are there any questions that anybody has?
I have one for you,
Sure.
Dave. On 9th West there, if you were to acquire the property that would be essentially a continuation of Hoyt Place out the east direction, thanks, Andrew.
Okay.
Then the SR3 would allow you to do what if you had 2 access points?
So the ordinance actually stays the same, whether you have it's the International Fire Code that is based upon one access point. So the ordinance is still for single family or very limited attached, but because of the one access point in the International Fire Code, it allows you to go up to 30. And so if we did acquire that to the east, which it is not in the plan at all, then it would allow us to go more. However, the site, it's if you know, we have to go through the plan development, and so we did not submit a site plan at this point. But when you look at the site plan, you're like, well, it was just made for 30 units. It's just a very natural fit. Does that answer your question? It's not based
Yes,
on the
but
ordinance, it's based on the International Fire Code as
No.
far as up to 30.
I understand that, and I suppose that because you haven't, without this, you haven't been through development process yet, and the idea of having 2 access points is hypothetical enough that we can't predict what you could fit on there. I'm looking at Michaela and just making sure that if we had 2 access points, if the international code allowed you to do more than 30, what the greatest potential of that site would be was my question.
Yeah, for us, even if for example, the SR3 allows us to do, so let's say we acquire a second access. Well, that would allow us to go to more units, correct? But we really look at the surrounding environment, and it's surrounded by single-family homes. And I have always felt that it needs to reflect the surrounding community. And so for us to go inside and go, oh, well, now we're just going to do attached, 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 and the neighbors are like, well, this is a single family. I actually, we're very conscientious of reflecting the surrounding community. It's surrounded by single families, and the intent is single families on smaller lots that fit within the SR3.
I appreciate that. I just, if planning could give me any clarification on what that SR3 zoning would actually allow. Let's say that Dave and the other owners disappear and the intent to match the surrounding neighborhood is not reflected in the future owner.
Right,
What is the
right.
potential?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the combined parcels, there are eight properties. I believe it's about 1.5 acres. So single-family detached, I think would allow for about 30 units. If Dave wasn't involved and someone else was to develop it, they could go up to 6 units, attached units, townhome type units that are 1,500 square foot lots. So I'm not sure what that would be, maybe 40, 45 units that could go in there. but that would about max it out if they went to single-family attached,
Okay,
up to 6.
okay, that helps, thank you.
And what's another really important thing to consider is we have been asked over the years by other municipalities to go into really difficult areas when there's difficult landowners and large scale. And one that we did was 36 landowners, about 1,800 units, and we went in and did development agreements with the municipality because their concern, of course, was, well, what if Dave dies, or what if he gets bumped out and somebody else comes in? And so I'm a big fan of saying if we're going through a plan development process, and I know some in the city have been favorable of development agreements and others shy away from it a little bit, but I think that it's to maintain the integrity of these neighborhoods, I think there's some real merit to saying we want development agreements that run with the land. And then it is not a matter of saying, well, does Dave stay or go? But what we have seen in the past, one in particular, the development agreement was actually something we did with the city. A new mayor came in and turned it upside down. And so we've seen it to where the city says we want to be protected, and we say we want to protect the integrity, and we've actually had it to where the city turns it upside down and bypasses the smart planning, as crazy as that sounds.
It sounds like the International Fire Code is, in essence, a development agreement to ensure that 30 remains the maximum, barring acquisition of a property that would allow a second route of access.
Well, when it goes through the process, for example, it'll go through Ted Itchon, and Ted will look at it. So if we put 31 units, Ted's going to say, are you going to sprinkler all those? And we said no, and he said, according to International Fire Code, you either do 30 or you sprinkler everything. And so that's going to be part of the process, the approval process, but Ted is involved in that, in the design very quickly, and he looks at that saying, so not only is it numbers of units, but it is turning radius and access and 150 feet with your fire hose and all those types of things as well.
Council members, I'm sorry, I just need to bring to your attention that the developer's time has expired, so if you would like to continue the conversation.
I'm satisfied.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff while they're up at the table in regards to this project? All right, guess we'll get it scheduled, right? Thanks. All right, we'll move on to item number 9, which is the master plan amendment and rezone of 552 North and 1500 West. Again, we have Nick Tarbett and John Anderson. John Anderson is the senior planner for Salt Lake City.
I don't know if the senior planner, I'm a senior planner. So.
Whatever.
Just semantics, so. Okay, well, thanks for letting me be here today. I'm sure you're all aware this project does have a lot of history, so we won't go through
How much
all
history?
Of it. Since November 2012.
Okay.
It is in the chronology that should be in the report, and if you want to go through that whole thing. The original request was a master plan amendment from low-density residential to medium-density residential, and change in the zone from R1 7000 to SR3. The property is at 552 North, 1500 West. There was some initial opposition from the public, and the Fair Park Community Council also voiced their opposition. It was based mostly on just a general increase in density, but also allowing other housing types that are allowed in the SR3, like attached housing or duplexes, as was just discussed. The Planning Commission discussed it. They did make a negative recommendation to the council. In March of 2014, it was briefed by the City Council, and some of you were there, I believe. The council asked the applicant to kind of go back to the drawing table and maybe look at other zones, other options. R1 5000, for example, was one that was mentioned. The applicant did move forward with a plan. They came up with a design utilizing the R1 5000. They did have to submit an application for plan development, as some of the design standards did not necessarily did not completely meet the zoning ordinance standards. So we have been working with the applicant until earlier this year. The applicant stated that he would like to move forward with the original request rather than with the R1 5000. Didn't feel that it was going to have the desired effect or create the desired development that he would like to move forward with. So we're back here with the original proposal, which is again a master plan amendment from low to medium density and a change in the zone from R1 7000 to SR3. be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions? Great. How about, Dave, you want 5 minutes on this project as well?
So this again is very similar to what we saw on the last one. You're talking infill development surrounded by homes. When this project was brought to us, we met and worked with staff, and the question was, is this infill development? Yes, it meets the definition of infill development. Is there an infill ordinance? Yes, there is an infill ordinance, and that is the SR3. When we, as John had said, when we went to City Council, some of the neighbors had said, well, we don't want it to be SR3, so City Council asked us to look at the R1-5000. This project doesn't actually qualify for R1-5000 because R1-5000 is for more of your block face development, your traditional development. For example, Columbus Court up at the base of the foothills, that went from low density to R1-5000. And this, again, is several long, narrow parcels. But what happened when we went to the R1-5000, we were basically having to manipulate the ordinance to do something that was setting a precedent that the surrounding landowners would not be able to meet. For example, and I guess it doesn't have it on the screen, but the property to the right, we knew that he would want to come on and develop. He has since come on and said, could you please include ours, or please include his? Well, if you apply the R1-5000 and you have to do your setback for his front yard, then you have to do an alley. There simply is not the space. And so, but if you can do the SR3, then you get into smaller lots, detached. Again, we suggested from the very beginning that we would do a development agreement to maintain the integrity of this area. There have been 2 or 3 vocal opponents. One of the ladies, she just laughs and says, if you build one house in here, then I'll support it. And I said, well, that doesn't really work. Here we are with Salt Lake City, and nothing against any of you folks, but Salt Lake City, as we have seen, has been rated one of the worst in the nation for first-time home buyers. There simply is not the product on the market to meet the demand. And so we have to get really smart about these infill areas. And here we have a state highway. The traffic patterns will be fine. You have an elementary school, you have a regional park, you have commercial space. We meet the front yard, side yard, rear yard, height. We meet all of those requirements. And our parking, we exceed by about 150% using the SR3. The R1-5000, if there was a different site plan, it would show that we actually have to take a portion of the road and leave it as open space now, but as we go into the next phase, then we have to apply that open space into the next phase. There's simply nowhere to put it because we already have open space integrated into our design. And so this is, the design that we have is rear loaded. We minimize the pedestrian and vehicular interaction. We connect the neighborhoods, and we can provide a very price-sensitive product. But what happens by doing the R1-5000, you decrease our density by about 30%, and yet we still have the same costs in road, in infrastructure, and so those costs then get relayed to the other units. And so it really puts us in an area that is a very price-sensitive area, and we are not able to deliver in the price point that we want.
Any questions for the petitioner? Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Robinson. All right, Nick, I don't think we have any other questions, so we'll schedule it for a vote. Okay, on to item number 10, which is our council priorities second quarter update. We have Jennifer Bruner, who is the Deputy Director of the Salt Lake City Council staff, and Lehua Weaver. Thanks for being here, giving us an update on our Priorities.
We have organized this in a bit of a familiar way, but also have a suggestion for how best to use the time, if it pleases the council. In your packets, we have provided updated quarterly reports for nearly all of the projects that the council's directed staff to focus on. There are 3 priority projects, as you know, and then 7 active projects. There are a few active projects that didn't get as much work done during March through June, mostly just because of some work that was done on the annual budget. So that was kind of a big part of our time, where time was spent for several staff members. What we do have in your staff report, though, is a list of questions specific to the council's economic development priority project and the housing and homelessness project. And we thought that if it works for the council, that staff could just walk through those questions with you and get that direction firmed up for next steps.
Great, let's work through them.
So the questions to consider for the economic development priority are whether first, whether the council would like to adjust the goal of the 2016 economic development priority. As you probably remember, the original goal was to focus on the creation and approval of an economic development strategic plan. And now we have received information from the economic development director that the process of implementing, or excuse me, of making a plan will take 12 to 18 months. So the question is, would you like staff to move to focus on a different item? And we actually have a potential list of things that could be included. That's attachment C1 in your packet.
You said it's C1?
Yes, would you like me to go through them?
Yes.
So the 3 types of options we have are first, reviews and audits, second, ordinance changes, and third, future funding options. Under the reviews and audits, option A is the building services audit, which, as you know, is beginning as we speak. Option B is an economic development ordinance review, which would be a much bigger project designed to identify economic development obstacles and opportunities. Under ordinance changes, there's option A, which is to initiate a local procurement ordinance that requires that a certain percentage of city purchasing come from local businesses, and specifies that these kinds of purchases should come across a wide variety of services and products, rather than, I think Councilmember Mendenhall mentioned, she didn't want it all just to be food. The second type of ordinance change to consider would be to include 2 types of options in the reporting ordinance, which is forthcoming. One would be the to include as part of the annual city budget recommendations the share of overall city budget that's spent directly on economic development, and compare that to other cities in Utah and cities in other states. The second option for the reporting ordinance would be that the administration would provide an annual city economic outlook report that could be similar to the city's annual housing report. And then in the third category of potential goals are the future funding options. A would be to fund city economic development functions at a higher level than previously. B, provide additional funding for the data needs of divisions involved in all aspects of economic development, including planning, transportation, and building services. And C would be reinitiate the neighborhood matching grants program, which supported branding for neighborhood business districts.
Derek.
I'm having a hard time finding where we're at in the packet.
So is it attachment C?
C1.
So we go to, we're in the memo, and then we skip over to attachment C.
Because the C1 cover memo is not it. It's the staff report
It says
priority.
Staff report, staff report, ECDEVT, attachment C1. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4 links down from the first link.
Oh, okay, there we go.
I apologize for that. I wasn't aware that the packet turns out differently.
Thank you.
Can I jump in while you guys get
Yeah, go for it.
situated? On item, is that reverb coming from me? Economic Development Ordinance Review. Have we been gathering opportunities for ordinance change? I'm assuming yes, over the last year of discussion. I imagine that Director Fritz is still a bit new in the position to make those type of recommendations, but gosh, it seems like we've been spitballing some potential for ordinance improvement for a while.
I could take a stab at that.
Yeah,
I can't think of the name of the department, but the Neighborhood and Community Development Department, Mike Reberg has been working with his staff to come up with a lot of suggestions on streamlining, and they are going to brief the chair and vice chair soon, just as a little preview, and then they have that transmittal ready to go. So there will be a set of ordinances that come. They will have an indirect effect on economic development. So they're not, direct things, but those snags that developers and community members complain about, they're bringing us a package of those for you to consider modifying.
and I'm assuming that would include the suggestions that have been made even in the last 6 months from some of our business owners in the community. There was Micah Peters and Missy Grice and an editorial put together that we discussed at a previous council meeting that had some suggestions we wanted to run through.
Yeah, I haven't
the
seen
admin.
that yet. I think what we asked them to do is to focus on the things that were readily identified by their staff to get some quick things taken care of. So we need to, I haven't looked
See
at
if
it
those
yet.
things are
And-
included.
Yeah.
And the things for the past 6 months, I've been keeping my eye on, so it may not be the same format that the administration has, but I've been tracking those possibilities as they come up.
So what kind of funding are we talking about? Because it seems like this is already part of community and neighborhood development, economic development, and work that the council staff has been working on. So what are we talking about funding? It feels like our plate is already potentially full.
Yes.
So I'm not inclined to fund some further excavation when we probably have a lot of good that we could do in the next year with what's been generated already.
And if I remember correctly, the Councilmember Penfold was the one who suggested this, and he's not here, unfortunately, to be able to explain a little more his reasoning. But our work has been to sort of try to make sure all of these potential options are here. But I would certainly agree with your assessment that our plates are pretty full.
Yeah.
So we can set that one aside. In the past, there has been some discussion of hiring outside legal counsel that would serve just to add to the effort from the city attorney's office and from our office to go through ordinances in a bigger way to make them easier to understand and more friendly for the people who are adhering to those ordinances. So there's always that. It's a huge project, and it's one that periodically comes up. It's probably a long-term goal, but not not anything that we have put any
Yeah,
work into yet.
it feels, for me, it feels like that wouldn't be the highest and best use of our time or money with economic development as one of our top 3 goals this year. And that focusing on the specific ordinance opportunities we've already identified is something we can do in, quick succession. Yeah.
Okay. That's helpful.
Thank you for that, Cindy. That helps. I love the local procurement ordinance idea, and that we broaden it beyond food. Maybe we should just pass a law that we only buy local food, and then we can have a procurement quota for the rest of our.
I would support that.
It's gonna get pretty rough around here in the winter, but.
We have squash.
Okay, Allison. So
So the question, the policy question for the council is whether you would like to adopt an additional goal for the 2016 priority, or I guess the alternative, which Councilmember Mendenhall alluded to, is to continue what we've been doing so far and not explicitly adopt an additional goal.
I'm comfortable moving forward with the way we're going, the route we're going.
I can imagine that Director Fritz is going to want to have a meaty conversation with us in the coming year about opportunities that she identifies.
That
So I
she
think-
sees as a newbie coming in, for sure.
Yeah, so taking on a big investigative multi-year review, this doesn't seem like the time for that.
Yep.
So carry on with the items that are already underway.
Yes. Council members, if you're comfortable with that, give us a thumbs up, just so we know where you're at. Okay, that's 5 in favor.
Thank you. The second policy question is whether the council would like to request that the administration consider, as part of the Economic Development Strategic Plan, a list of elements that are right there in the staff report, so I hope you're able to find them, that actually are very similar to what the council adopted in September 2015. So it's essentially, it would lay out the parameters for an economic development strategic plan.
So would that be 2A, B, C, D, and F?
Yes,
Okay.
that first paragraph is a mistake. I apologize for that.
Okay. So that would be set forth in a formal way, an overall policy vision for economic development in Salt Lake City. Are you in favor of that, council members? Show by thumbs up.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, are we still on C1?
No, we're on,
Yeah, I thought
we're
so.
on item 2, 2A, 2B, 2C, 2D, 2E, 2F.
In the staff report.
In the staff report. Yep.
Thank you.
And the heading is second quarter policy questions, right?
Yep. So we'll do that one more time. 2A, which is set forth in a formal way an overall policy vision for economic development in Salt Lake City. That's a thumbs up from everybody. B would be build on the work done by Enterprise Salt Lake City process rather than repeat or restart the public engagement process with the business community. Are you in favor of that, council members? Okay. Incorporate the council's adopted 2016 economic development policy statement. Are you in favor of that?
Do we have a copy of that in here?
It is not in there. It's the one that was actually included in the letter that we sent to the administration, that the council sent to the administration a couple weeks ago.
I remember that. Thanks.
In favor of that, thumbs up. Incorporate economic development items, especially neighborhood nodes, from various adopted city master plans and small area plans. Show thumbs up if you want to incorporate that.
And we
Okay.
can change that nodes to business districts. I
yeah.
apologize.
No, you're fine. We knew what you were talking about.
Did we abolish the word node?
We did not yet. We're waiting for Stan to do that. And then 22E, incorporate a technology campus in the West Downtown or Granary District as an important element in the plan. Thumbs up if you're in favor of incorporating that.
Can we add technology or research?
Yeah. Council members, if you're in favor of that, show a thumbs up. Aaron and Andrew?
I just, feels preemptive to me. I'm not opposed to it, but I think
What's your criticism,
requiring
Aaron?
inclusion of it, that we haven't had enough discussion about what it takes to be a sustainable technology campus and whether or not we have the acreage or the market or the interest to acquire something that's sustainable. I love the idea, you know I love it. I just think it's preemptive.
We talk
to
about catalytic
require-
projects all the time, and
Yeah.
I think that if you're able to start something, like they say, if you build it, they will come. I think if we're able to build something, things will turn over, especially in the Granary District. We're on the Fleet Block or in that area.
Well, we're just saying it has to be then two different focus, technology or research, right? I want those things to succeed, but I think Derek probably has also been to some of the conference presentations and done some of that investigation that shows that other cities they try to do districts like that, and that there is some threshold of money invested and bodies on the ground and sustainable finances to sustain the shared pieces of those projects, that without that they end up failing, and I'm not saying we're going to
Yeah,
fail.
Cindy has a
Just
suggestion.
And a suggestion
haven't had the
to
discussion.
Councilmember Mendenhall's point is, instead of saying incorporate, that instead of using the word incorporate, you can say something like evaluate, because the questions
on
that
board with
you're
that.
raising are something that they would naturally do, so.
Yes,
Because
great.
it's an important thing for people who are interested, but you need more information.
Yes.
So, what was it, explore?
So it'd be
Incorporate.
evaluate.
Evaluate a technology campus in the west downtown. What about including the West Side Master Plan as well? Because there's a lot of land over there.
Yeah.
So I'm not seeing how that would be fit into that sentence. So
You're
evaluate.
just adding the west downtown, West Side Master Plan and/or Granary District as an important element in the plan.
Evaluate a technology or research campus in
In-
West Downtown and or Greenery. I think the point, though,
West,
Mr. Chair, is that the West Downtown area and the Greenery District are proximal to tracks.
The West Side Master Plan is too, is it not, with the Green Line as well as the 9-line corridor?
In time.
In time, that's right, because we're planning for the future.
I think the point is just to have exploration here, because nothing's tangible, nothing's concrete. We don't even know the first thing about what we're talking about specifically, so.
so we would use the words West Side Master Plan area.
Mhm.
Okay,
That's,
thank you.
yeah.
Are you comfortable with that wording,
Yeah.
council members? Thumbs up? Great. And then the last item in 2.2F is include tangible measurements and indicators to gauge the city's relative success for achieving the goals and visions set forth in Economic Development Master Plan that can be tracked year by year and over a longer period of time. The city could leverage its contract with the University of Utah for demographic work to help with this. If you're in favor of that, include it as well. We've got one more. There we go. Unanimous.
Okay, that takes us through policy question number 2. The third policy question is, which follow-up discussion options would the council like to pursue, if any? Note, depending on the options selected, the council may need to extend work on this council priority into 2017. And then the list is below. I can go through that list if you'd like, Mr. Chair.
Great, let's do it. So we're all on the same page.
Could I
Okay.
just add an intro?
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind? This is, we came to you first with a couple of specific proposals, and we didn't explain them well, and they didn't really mesh with what council members had in mind. So the staff members interviewed each council member. Now we have an array of ideas here that Allison has listed, and if the council members would like to do things as a group, there's options for that. Also, if there's something that you would like to do in your district that's tailored to the needs of your district, then that is also an option. So these are not either or. You can do any of them or several of them.
That was a good intro to Allison.
Yes. So option A is hold an off-site council meeting at the Fair Park. Invite residents and businesses to comment on economic development needs for the West Side and Central City, including their vision and preferences for economic development.
So this is the one that I brought up. For me, I thought it would be a great idea. We did it last year, holding an off-site area, but it wasn't about economic development. And seeing that it is one of our priorities this year and into this foreseeable future, I think to benefit North Temple and the surrounding areas, it would be really important for us to reach out to business holders and neighbors to take a look at that and see what their vision is and what they'd like to see. And that, I thought the Fair Park, we have huge money going into the Fair Park. It's in the RDA area. We talk about a catalytic project. That's one that's started off already. So if you're in favor of holding an offsite for your own community, or just like what it says here, what Cindy read into is that you could hold it in your area. It could be smaller, it could be larger. It's just what you feel would be, that you could adapt for your community or your district.
So would we be creating a model and it would be replicated pretty much the same? And do we have budget to do potentially 7 off-site meetings?
Yes, you could do it 2 different ways, and we have done these at different times in the past. You could choose to have it be a council meeting off-site in each
Like
district
meetup.
or in the, like that. Or you could just have your own community meeting in your district so it isn't with the whole council. So any variation on that. And yes, every year we do have community outreach money that can be used for anything related to these purposes. So that's available.
And I guess maybe the best question would be is if you read these items A through E, do you have any reservations for any of them? That way we don't have to go through them individually.
My only reservation is the one that comes up to us pretty regularly about staff time. And this is a lot of staff time, it sounds like to me. So it feels great to say we're going to do tours and meetings in every district and stakeholders, discussions, and then suddenly we can't afford time-wise to do other priority work because we've just maxed it out on a bunch of this. So I wish I had a thermometer of what we are allocating time-wise with staff for each priority, and as we say yes to each thing, it shows us how we're consuming resources.
And we actually could bring you some feedback about this. We had left this so open with such a variety because it is a priority, and so we also listed that it may continue into the next calendar year. So that works in a year when we have the same council members continuing on. And so if you could give us some sense of where you're heading, then we could come back to you and say we can fit this in within this time frame or that time frame.
Yeah, it doesn't all have to be done at once. And like we said, it's a work in progress. Economic development isn't going to stop. It's just other opportunities for us to create next year as well.
And I think in terms of on-site meetings, it would be helpful to know, is it important to council members to feel like we have had an on-site meeting in each of your districts? Or is it more important that we are covering certain topics or that we are attracting certain audiences to get feedback from them? So maybe even on that spectrum, it would be helpful, a straw poll on whether council members want a meeting in each of your districts or not.
Well, I think from my perspective, the Fair Park one is sort of a joint one, and I'm fine with that. That's sort of the key point for us. So I don't know if you'd want a separate one as well, but I'd be fine with one.
Mm-hmm.
Frankly, I think it's more of specific to business, not my district necessarily, but a business node area.
Mm-hmm.
North Temple, which concerns us both on the west side, that's a major piece for us. So.
And it also encompasses District 3.
I like B and D most of all, And I'm less concerned about citing a meeting in my district as I am about inviting the right mix of business types to have their ideas and their concerns voiced. And so the D aspect would satisfy that for me, and we could hold that here. And other district business owners could be invited, and I'd be satisfied with that. I really like the B because it gets at that potential for a technology or research campus being somewhere, and the most likely place is probably Granary or West Downtown. And I think fact-finding nights, when we bring a bunch of experts together, we end up generating some great ideas. And so I like that format, and whether it's off-site or not off-site, I don't really have a preference.
Some of these seem like sort of duplicates as well, or they could be combined. I don't feel like I need to do a community engagement process with District 4, but I would like to highlight certain opportunities that exist in the district. So I think we each, all 7 of us may have our own needs when it comes to economic development and engaging our constituents.
Are there any objections to what A through E? Anyone have any objections? You can totally see which would relate more to your district, but.
Just based on council time and bandwidth.
Okay.
I don't want to torpedo our other priorities.
I don't think anyone wants to torpedo other priorities.
I know, but
And just
it's sometimes
scheduling,
that
and
once we
staff
get
will be
into
great.
it-
Staff will be great saying, okay, we're going to start here, we're going to move on to here, with the priorities. Like Andrew and Andrew said District 2 and District 1 could combine. That's a pretty easy deal. So if you're in favor of this, some sort of off-site stakeholder retreat, organizing community discussion built around economic development in your district, show me a thumbs up. If I can. If you're in favor of holding an off-site meeting, council meeting, whether it's with stakeholders, talking about economic development in your district, highlighting areas during a tour, whatever it might be, are you in favor in doing that in your district? And then scheduling it with staff. Cindy?
Just maybe to add what we, based on what I was saying a minute ago, what we would do is check in with each of you guys, see where you're coming from after you've had a chance to think some more about this, and then just report back to the council on, here's what it's looking like so far. Does this make sense to you? Here's how many months it would take, and here's how much time it would take. And then you can direct us from there.
Sure. I'm less concerned about district as much as economic areas. Yeah. There's Research Park, North Temple, whatever it is, Fair Park, something like that, more than my district or in general. So, and what Cindy's point is exactly right on. This is the intent. Let's evaluate the efficacy of it and move forward.
Okay. Council members, let's get this down so we know exactly where we're going. Not by district, but economic development, fact-finding night in the west side. There we go. Compared to downtown or the east side. Is that something you're willing to look into?
Sure.
Great. All right. Any other questions for item number 2? Economic development.
No, if you're okay, we can switch gears to housing and homelessness.
Let's do it.
And you have to tell us how to find that.
It's just right above, right?
Above.
Council priorities
Yes,
number
on
1.
the council, it is in the staff report, and then also from the portal, if you find staff report priority housing and homelessness Q2, there may be some references to that document as well.
So do you all have the the quarterly report, the project report, dealing with housing and homelessness. Just as a preface, a whole lot of things listed in the second quarter appear to me to have been done, you know, because a lot of it is, a lot of it was related to the budget, to the mayor's site selection committee, and to the collective impact effort in the county. There are some things that are hanging fire that you may want to discuss, and you may want to look forward a little in the third quarter, which we're already in. And it's very quite possible that a whole lot of this stuff is going to be answered within the next few weeks in dealing with homelessness and housing. But so if I may, these are the things that I think are outstanding that we may want some direction on as a staff. One of them, if you go to the quarter two and you look at the first bullet that says working with the administration, particularly in terms of the administration's goal to address homelessness issues, consider discussing with service providers about how the city might meet their needs in 2016 that cannot be addressed by other levels of government or other organizations. And that, you know, that's sort of based on the idea that local government can fill holes where holes are seen. We have not, you know, as a council staff, have not talked to service providers about that. And it would seem to me that we'd have to make a list of service providers and then do a little survey. So, would there be any interest among the council to do that?
I'd say I'm interested. I just don't know where, outside the budget process, where we look for funding. If we're going to discuss with them about what do they need financially or maybe otherwise, maybe we're thinking, but
right.
Not have anything to bring to the table for it. So I just don't know what we have to bring to the table on discussion.
Well, you would have on the table, I mean, knowing the needs, the council might have to appropriate money to address the needs. I mean, that's the policy decision. But it would also be helpful just to know if there are any needs out there that we haven't really, you know, that Salt Lake City as a whole has not addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Russell, I wonder how our current appropriations to homeless services might be affected by the resultant collective impact shifts on homeless services. We really haven't seen how the service model itself is going to change. We've heard in the last week about the numbers for housing and the distribution of housing, but I have yet to see what that means in terms of the way service is delivered. And I would like to see that. So if I might ask my peers that we actually consider making a formal request to perhaps the county to hear about the actual delivery of service orientation change in order to fulfill the outcomes-based model the collective impact is developing. If you follow me there. Getting a lot of dead stares here, but
no,
what
I
I'm
was just
saying
writing.
is
That's my writing look.
If we change the way if we change the way that service is delivered, then it makes sense that perhaps we reorient the way we distribute our funds.
Yes,
and so it might not mean we need to appropriate additional money.
Right.
That money might already be there. Yeah, but we don't know. We haven't been told how services may or may not change.
So, yes, so you're looking with how the current allocations comport or differ from what the collective impact effort is going to do. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would agree, but I also think that the collective impact is taking a broad view, and we're, part of what I'm seeing in this is maybe looking at the short term, because we're looking at a 3-year process minimum for some of the changes we're talking about. And we've got immediate needs, which we talked about this year about downtown, and how do we help that immediately with, I'm thinking of service providers who lost funding for some case management services this year. As of July 1st, lost funding for them, positions are ended, maybe they got picked up in another capacity, but those are the things I'm thinking of, Russell, when you bring this up, that are there current things that have been happening that aren't happening as of now because they lost funding or something shifted that could benefit us in the next 6 months to a year? Is that accurate?
So current services that have already been affected by financial cuts.
Yeah, I mean, just grants run out every year, and the collective impact, yeah, I agree, and we need to see that and make sure we're in line with it, but I don't know that that's going to affect us in the next year necessarily very dramatically. So part of my intention in hoping this, if we follow through it, is to say what's the immediate stuff to keep us kind of head above water as much as possible and make some progress.
So you would be okay looking at gaps or uncovering gaps in service right now and exploring our own general fund for additional dollars to fill gaps?
Yeah, I don't want to ignore collective impact, but I think that's not going to affect us immediately for a bit. We want to be in line with it, but there's some immediate gaps maybe we need to take a look at.
I guess just to go back to the potential for us to make a request, I'm not sure that collective impact actually is going to make a strategy for the change in deployment of services. I'm wondering, I would like an answer to whether or not there is an assumption that the change of the physical distribution of services by dispersing people, by having better facilities, will inherently make the same model actually work better. I think that I'm wondering if that is an assumption here, or if it is actually that we're going to both change the physical distribution of services by thinning out the population into more demographic specific populations in smaller centers, and we're going to change the way we give service, basically. I don't know the answer to that, and I haven't heard that clearly communicated from the county. And maybe, David Litvak, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if you've heard that clearly communicated, I'd love to know it. Maybe I'm missing it. Are we changing services, or are we just changing buildings? If we're doing both, then when do we get to hear how services change?
Deputy Chief of Staff is David Litvak. He's coming up.
Is this, okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Mendenhall. So last week, Salt Lake County held a public work engagement, a public dialogue on the new service model that they are proposing. They also brought the new service model to Collective Impact a couple days later. I wasn't there, I was away from the office. There were some significant questions, as I understand, at Collective Impact, that the county was gathering some more information, and there was a special Collective Impact meeting set up for actually tomorrow morning to continue the conversation. I think some of the shape and the dynamics of the new service model are starting to come to light and starting to take shape themselves. I think it would, and I've spoken to the county a couple times, I think it would be very appropriate for the council to request a presentation from the county on their proposal on the new service model coming out of collective impact. My own impression is I think it's fair to say it's not just breaking up the population and hoping the current service model just works better. It really is trying to change the way services are being implemented.
And that's what collective impact is, if it's done,
Correct.
right, is outcomes first.
Driven by, yes.
Then you look at how you're funding your outcomes, right? Or you look at the programs that serve the outcomes, and then you look at the funding for the programs. And if you're not getting your outcomes, you go back to your funding and your programs. So I guess
there's still a lot of questions and details. And as I've heard Mayor McAdams describe it, is right now the new service model, there's some things that are a little bit clearer than others, some things that are still, I don't know if he says 40 or 50,000 foot view. One of the specifics in the new service model is the Pay for Success program that will take some of the harder to house population that also intersect with the criminal justice population, and oftentimes they're really chronically homeless, but they don't meet that definition because they go in and out of jail. So every time they go into jail, they're no longer considered homeless, so it disrupts the definition of chronically homeless. They have a Pay for Success initiative the county does that would target 300, I believe, is the target population of individuals of this type of population for housing and services. The other piece that is starting to take shape is the intake process. An RFP was recently issued by the county to create a third-party RFP, a third-party intake and assessment where individuals, starting with the current locations, Midvale and the Rio Grande facility, a third party would do that assessment to determine what level of services are needed by that individual or by that family. The goal is that hopefully that becomes a part of the no wrong door, and that when we actually look at developing the new service model and the no wrong door, that access, as we spoke earlier, access to that intake and assessment become available in what you wouldn't consider homeless service locations, right? In schools, in other places, in healthcare facilities. So that's starting to take a little bit of shape as well. But there are other things like really shifting and realigning the focus towards housing and the need for affordable housing to address homelessness on a more sustainable level. There's still a lot of details that are left out on how we're going to get there or what the number is that we need to get there.
Thank you. That helps. And Mr. Chair, have we scheduled a request with the county, or have we requested the county to schedule a meeting with us?
We're looking into that, for sure.
That would be great. And I'm sorry to derail us, Russell, from your question, but it does seem like we have yet to really hear how service will be delivered through the collective impact result. And so us going about looking at gaps seems like a duplication of efforts.
Well, and Mr. Chair, just to be clear, these questions and issues were written in January, and time is dynamic. So, so we're here to double check about where we ought to go, not why we have to continue with the questions at hand.
Well, Mr. Chair, I would endorse this because I still think that when we talk about the homeless collective impact, we're talking about criminal justice, the jail. We're talking about multiple facilities across Salt Lake City and the county. We're talking about housing across the city and the county. These are big stuff, right? It's going to take a while. I think it's the right track, but these are going to take a while to get in place. And what I'm thinking about particularly is right now with single men and women, particularly on Fifth West and Rio Grande in that part of our city. And are there gaps right now that as a city we can take on that aren't going to be counterproductive to the overall concept, but will also mitigate some of the real struggles still going on down there. I mean, it's really, really, really bad. And a lot of people are trying their darndest to get a handle on it, but that's what I think about when I think about the gaps, is saying, as of right now, while this bigger thing is coming in place, are there things we can do that we're missing, just to help out the community particularly?
Could I just to insert a little bit, we have been talking with the county about coming in and getting that scheduled. And I think that you've raised, though, here something that is a little more specific than what we had first thought. And that it sounds like what you'd like to see is them describe what will community, the collective impact look like on the ground. When that is moving forward, what will look different in the future time than it looks now? That's one way we can ask it of them, and I don't know if that'll get to some of those things. Another thing is that during the budget process, the administration made a list of needs, and the council did choose some of those for funding and some others. And we, I think, have talked about the possibility of scheduling a time to get an update from the administration on how that funding has been implemented, and maybe at that time we could look at that list and anything that has come up since, just to address the what are the gaps. Does that make any sense?
Did that help, Andrew?
Yes. To the specific, yeah, this is very
To the
specific.
specificity of it?
Mhm.
So, so bear with me, please, because some of these questions were big issues and still may be. If you look at maybe the 5th bullet point of on the second quarter, there was consider allocating more funds for the return of grocery shopping carts in their appropriate locations, and the staff response was that this item might be addressed in another way in a future ordinance, because the Downtown Alliance was considering requesting an ordinance requiring stores to place devices on their shopping carts that cause wheels to lock when shopping carts leave the store's property. That still may be a live issue. I haven't heard from the Alliance. I haven't heard that they're forwarding anything yet, but that may be something that appears before the council. I'm not sure it's going to cure stray shopping carts, but that's an issue that's out there. So the question is it relevant enough to the council to keep an eye out for it?
What's the cost currently? That would probably help.
For the shopping carts?
Yeah. What is PD losing, or who's paying right now? What is
Well,
the
it's
cost?
the program originally was a spending X amount. I think it was like $85 a shopping cart or something to return them to the stores, and then over the last year, council staff learned that this was really a once-a-week program run by a third-party contractor who at one point was no longer interested in picking up shopping carts.
And who were they being, or what budget was paying that third-party contractor?
I don't know.
At the time, I believe it was the private industry, the grocery stores and such.
But, okay, so we don't know the exact cost, but a once-a-week service was not reducing the number of shopping carts very much. And It may still be a problem. I don't see as many shopping carts around, but I still see shopping carts. And the downside to an ordinance is that some stores already have the locking wheels, so this would be making other stores follow what their colleagues are doing. And I don't know whether that's good
Is it
policy
possible
or
to
not.
find out which stores in the downtown area have locking carts and which don't?
Yes.
Doesn't it seem like the natural economics of that situation would, I mean,
That
if
they
it's
would
not
do it on
worth it
their
for
own?
them to
Yeah.
pay to get them retrieved, then they would pay for a lock on the wheel.
Sure.
I just hate to do an ordinance to make sense of economics that should take care of themselves.
I think Smith's recently installed locking wheels, and they, I think, if I'm not mistaken, were the primary reason this third party existed to begin with.
So it might have already been resolved, you mean?
No, I'm just saying that Smith's, as the largest grocery retailer, no longer needed the service of this third party to go collect.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Downtown Harmon's, I'm assuming, has locking carts too.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't love this.
So when I'm going through the stuff that in my opinion hasn't been done.
And those are the items in red?
Yes.
Okay.
And
When we're talking about shopping carts, to me, if the carts are that important to the stores, they would go out and put the locks on themselves. That's just, I mean, what do the carts cost? They're $500, $800
yes,
each?
it's reasonable to assume that, but
Right.
but there are stray shopping carts in the city. So
Well, I think it might also just be a factor, it's not a unified policy. It may be a store by store and management by management, so an individual budget may not see it that way, but there's not a coherent thing.
Cindy? Free us from
I'm-
shopping carts.
Get us out of this cart.
I'm looking for a way to free you from the whole conversation. I'm wondering, something has occurred in this year that we didn't anticipate, and that is the change in the RDA structure and the budget conversations that have been occurring. We didn't contemplate that when we wrote up the goals for this at the beginning of the year. And I think that you're going to have a huge opportunity in September and October to talk with the administration about housing opportunities, and we have several things to schedule that you've given us here for homeless issues. So I don't know if you want to go through each of these things as we're talking about them aloud. It feels like some of them are just so out of date that we couldn't have anticipated when we wrote up the list in January. So just a thought, we can plan on the RDA housing discussion. We have one transmittal from the administration that is on housing policy, and then I think there are 3 more coming from them, and that housing policy discussion, the first one is already scheduled. So it's a thought.
and Mr. Chair, just to follow up, I'm looking at the stuff that I see that hasn't been done, and the council and the administration have just picked up a pretty heavy load and have been doing okay, and the stuff that hasn't been done isn't necessarily central to the goal of the council to address homelessness and housing. And by example, I mean, grocery shopping carts are a good example. And when that question, when that list was made, no one had imagined going to San Francisco and seeing porta potties on trailers that are staffed, and so it's always a trade-off that a lot of this stuff, like the clean team, that was addressed by a budget appropriation earlier this year. And I think Cindy's right, that maybe we ought to back up and see where we are and then take it from there.
So, Russell, you have done such a great job of thought provocation in our minds that I think that we're missing 2 council members that we really need to have included in this discussion.
Okay.
So let's move on to, I think that they really need to be included in this and have their input. It's a lot to, I mean, you really have brought up a lot of information that we haven't discussed before, so.
And I think that as staff, we're realizing we are asking these questions really in a way that isn't helpful or conducive to discussion. I'm texting with Lehu and Jennifer, and we're thinking, oh, we shouldn't have done it that way. So we'll come back with a more dynamic approach. And
For council
see how that goes.
priorities.
For council priorities.
Yeah. So, yeah, Russell, this is good. I mean, it's good stuff because we're diving into the weeds, which everybody wants to talk about, right? But we just can't make up our mind today, so.
Right, and that's understandable, but again, the stuff in black versus the stuff in red has, far outweighs the red.
Right. Okay, so we're going to ponder that, and you're going to come back to us with some more detail. And we're going to move on to item number 11, which is the budget amendment. Budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2016 and 17. We have Jennifer Bruno and Mary Beth Thompson, who is the interim director of the finance department.
So I can just
and we get the pleasure of Senior Michael Ackerlow here as well.
So I can just summarize, this is kind of a, I guess I would say, a specialty budget amendment that is really intended to address 2 specific projects that are time sensitive, which is why it's treated as outside of the process of the normal budget amendment, which will be coming probably later in October to the council. So the first item is to recapture and reappropriate funds that were left over when the public safety building project was completed. As you know, the voters approved $125 million general obligation bond. The project was designed and built and completed, and there was contingencies planned for in the project that didn't end up needing to be spent. And so that left some bond proceeds at the end of the project to spend, as well as some of the interest earned over the last period. Council may remember that typically you go in and reallocate interest as the project goes along, and you've done that a number of times with the public safety building bonds. The interest that was earned over the last period is $450,000 of the $2.5 million. So there was about $2 million left in public safety building bond funds, which in the context of a $125 million project is actually not that much. It's quite close to the project budget. The project came in under budget, and so the administration is proposing to repurpose these funds for a fire logistics center. And the reason is that the funds have to be spent in a way that's consistent with the bond language that was approved by voters. So these funds couldn't be reappropriated and used on, say, another city facility. It would have to be, sorry, say that again?
Or SAR.
Right, or debt service for a different purpose. The funds would either have to be spent on a purpose consistent with that language or essentially returned to taxpayers. So that's the proposal, and there are representatives here from the administration and fire department that can speak more to the details of the fire logistics center, but that's the context of the budget. So I don't know if there are any questions on that item before we move on to the next item in the budget amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
Go for it, Aaron.
Well, let's make the case for why those money shouldn't be returned to taxpayers and the need for the fire logistics center. I don't know if chief or deputy chiefs want to come up and speak to the case for a fire logistics center and how after just building the public safety building, if you could talk about why we need that.
So as far back as 2005, 2006, the fire departments tried to obtain logistics building for our reserve apparatus and special equipment. The first bond, $210 million, did not go through, and that contained our training center, Fire Station 14, and a logistics building. So we've been trying to obtain that for some period of time. Currently, we are using the reserve or the old fleet building to function as our logistics. The biggest difference we've noticed since having some of our apparatus were outside at training, they were literally in the backyard. Other stations or other apparatus were placed throughout the city in other fire stations. The problem with that, and we got hit on several occasions with this, is when the reserve apparatus is at a current fire station, especially a larger, busier station, the last thing they're thinking of is the maintenance and the inspections of those engines. And so what would happen over time is they would be in not disrepair, but not taken care of like they should be. And the biggest problem that we had is the equipment that's stored on those engines would disappear. So when you go into Station 3, we used to keep an engine when I was at Station 5, you go to Station 3 to pick up that reserve engine, and you've got to take 70% of your equipment off of your current engine to put on this reserve engine. When ISO rated us in 2000 or 2001, we were heavily hit by the status of our reserve apparatus, because the intent of that for ISO, you have some critical event or you have an infrastructure failure, you should be able to put firefighters in those engines and drive them out the door. We were not even close to having that. Since we obtained or partnered with the city to get our apparatus in the old fleet building, all of those reserves are taken care of. They're managed. The ongoing costs and maintenance of those are managed very well. And we've been able to completely stock every one of our reserve apparatus with a complete complement of gear, other than the radios and the medical equipment. So if we have to put somebody in a reserve, they simply drive to that one location, or in many instances, our apparatus people are bringing the rig right to their station, so they never have to leave their district. So we just got rated in 2012, our ISO rating, and we got nearly a perfect score for our reserve apparatus. Other than having, if they would like us to have a couple of more engines, other than that, we got perfect scores. So for us, having that money, $2.4 million, I believe, is what the total cost would be, is well worth the fire department's investment or the city's investment in trying to maintain our reserve apparatus. The other question I was asked earlier was, why not keep them spread out? Why not keep them like you do the fire stations so you've got a good response time? It's actually the reverse of that. Having all of our reserve apparatus in one location that's staffed and maintained allows us to just have our firefighters, when they get called back in, go to one rally point. When they get to the rally point, I may need a special truck at a scene, or I may need to put a squad in service or brush trucks. If I have all of those reserve apparatus in one location, no matter what we need, they go to the one rally point and they disperse from there. It's much easier for the fire department to maintain that one location than trying to maintain 8 or 9 locations for our apparatus.
Does this mean that the fleet building is going away because the fleet block's going to be developed?
It does. That's what it means. So we
Please
need to
say
find a
more
new
about
location.
the development of the fleet block.
We are in the process right now of cleaning the site and getting everything ready for the RFP.
Did you hear that, Derek
Are you
Kitchen?
cleaning the site before you release the RFP? Is that what you said?
There's some work to do on the site, yes. So, yeah.
Do you
We
know
want to make
that-
sure that we know everything that's existing on the site before we release the RFP.
I have more questions, but I'll wait until later.
I know. We just uncovered a gem. That's all my questions. Thank you, Chief.
So how would we be spending the rest, how would we allocate, how would we spend or pay for the rest of the building? The $2,069,000?
So the building would actually be funded by the proceeds that are left from the public safety building bond, combined with the interest that was earned on that money that's sitting there.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Did we identify property?
Yes, it's at the site right now where Fire Station 14 is. So when we're in construction on Fire Station 14, that'll
Okay.
relocate. The plan is to take the existing 14 and turn that into the Fire Training Center at some point. I do believe that's on the new impact fees facilities plan that'll be coming to you soon for your review. So it'll be on that same site. So there'll be Fire Training Center and the Logistics Center at the same location.
And we won't be using the existing fire training center property any longer after all that development happens?
Correct.
Okay. Interesting.
So is this
Andrew.
on the radar for anybody prior to the last month or two? I know I heard about it in January, but it didn't seem like it was on any long-term plans anywhere.
This building?
Yeah, the new, the apparatus building and the training center. Am I wrong about that?
Repeat the question.
I don't know that this was on anybody's radar as far as the need for these buildings on any forecasts or lists. Am I incorrect in that?
I think these buildings were on the CIP list.
Were they on the CIP list?
They
No.
were on a list, though.
No, this has been something that has been in discussion for a while, but it's not on the CIP list. It's not on the impact fees plan.
Okay.
But the need has been there, as Chief Dell explained, to bring all these together. So when the funds were available and we knew what they could be used for, we thought this was a good use.
Is there a timing issue with it?
Yes.
Was it predictable when these funds would become available? I mean,
No, and
bonds are,
in fact, I think that this unique situation has highlighted and we asked if the council wanted to create a policy for how this happens in the future, because I think there's a disconnect between how very large projects plan in a certain amount of contingency, which is a good thing to do. That's a good financial management strategy. But because of the time it takes for these large projects to both get underway, get planned, get designed and completed, and then even closed out once the building is open, it can take up to a year to sort of close out all the invoicing and expenses related to the project. You've then surpassed your deadline to reimburse the project with any leftover funds. So for example, there was a period of time when the public safety building project actually engineered down because some of the cost estimates showed us above budget. And so the engineers cut out some stuff and, re-engineered some of the scoping and picked different kinds of materials to make the project come in at budget. But then, of course, that includes contingency. So you've got this chicken and egg problem that will happen anytime there is a large project. So to me, the fact that it's $2 million left over from $125 million projects means it was managed well. But it presents this issue of if you have a GO bond, you have strings that are tied to that money, meaning they can't just be spent anywhere. They can't be spent to reimburse yourself from, project eligible expenses that happened 5 years earlier. So
I guess then my question is, how do we, just in the case of being in the desire to be thorough, how do we ensure that other eligible projects for this particular money have been considered? Because we haven't been presented with what other projects could qualify that actually are on our CIP, or, I'm sorry,
The impact fees facilities plan?
Thank you.
Yes. Nothing on the current plan would
Qualify?
qualify for this, especially in terms of
But
the
this
cost.
wasn't on the current
It's
plan
not.
either.
Right. So the bond funds could be used for the entirety of the construction of this project. So it is, it's a great question. Are there other projects? We have worked with the police and fire to get their list of items. The proposal is that if this comes in under budget, that some of this funding could be used for some police items as well. But this was the largest expense and the one that we felt was the top priority.
So just hypothetically, if this money had been realized in time for us to use it towards the construction of Station 14 before we issued the bonds for 14, we could have saved $2.5 million off of that bond.
Yes.
By using this money.
Yes.
But note that we didn't even complete this until May of
Right,
this
it's a
year.
timing
So
issue, I
we didn't
understand.
even complete the expenditures until May of this year.
And
So
I
it's
think
definitely a timing issue.
And I think that really is the issue, is you have, when you manage a project, the contingencies aren't released until certain, milestones in the project,
Sure.
because unforeseen things can happen, and then all of a sudden you need the contingency for the project. So to me, it just signals a systems issue for future large bond projects if they happen. There are other kinds of bonds that have strings of their own that require those funds be reimbursed essentially to the debt. So if it's just a sales tax bond, for example, or an LBA bond, those the council doesn't have discretion with. But GO bonds are a different a different kind of an animal, I guess, so.
I'm sorry, I keep dragging this conversation on. I'm really going to wrap it up right now, but I'm glad that we have money that we can do this building with that is coming out of a project that was managed well. I'm glad to hear the fleet block is getting spiffed up and that we might have some movement on that. And I'm curious about what upcoming, I can't off the top of my head categorize what GO bonds are out there, if any, right now that could have these kind of contingency monies come available in the future.
The council considered a very large one last year and ended up not pursuing it.
But there are none that are in the phases of that are funding construction currently that
No.
are tying up that happened before I got here.
No.
Okay.
But just on the open space bond, they just brought something to you to say, here's the last bit of money in that. That wasn't construction, but it was the last kind of little bit of money, and you made those decisions. So I think everything's done on the soccer,
Yep.
right?
Thanks.
So then, any other questions on that? Sorry. So then the next item is to use $124,000 from police impact fees, which has a healthy balance, to pay for 25% of the lease fee for the crime lab. Right now, that money is all proposed to come out of CIP, so this would essentially free up that general fund money. And it's an eligible use of impact fee dollars.
And moving forward, 25% can be allocated for
Right.
lease payments.
Yes,
Right.
correct.
Okay.
Okay. And there's no other item. Like I said, this is a kind of specialty budget amendment, so
Right.
no other items have been included in it.
Anyone have any other questions in regards to budget amendment number 1?
The administration is just letting us know that there's a little bit of a timing issue. So if the council could straw poll support of these items, then they would be able to start some of the pieces moving to make sure that.
So Jennifer, I understand that there's a timing issue with these, and we're going to straw poll that, all right? All
Give
those
them telephone.
who can support this funding for the budget amendment number 1, give a thumbs up. All right, that's 5 in favor.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer and Mike and Mary Beth. That is it for today's work session, but we do have some items we need to discuss in executive closed meeting. So I'll look for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I
First,
move that we move into closed executive session
For,
for the purpose of land acquisition,
And legal
property,
advice.
legal advice.
there's a motion by Councilmember Kitchen and a second by Councilmember Luke. We'll roll call this. Councilmember Kitchen?
Yes.
Yes. And all 5 of us are yeses. So if you, we're gonna have dinner, yeah, at the same time. So if you're not part of this closed session, we kindly ask you to leave now. Thanks.
Salt Lake City government. I'm your host, Poonam Kumar. On this week's show, we'll be talking to Salt Lake City Police Chief Mike Brown about his department's efforts to build better community relations. And our History Minute is about the Salt Palace. But first, let's start with our legislative update and look back.
The City Council discussed the city's effort to create 2 new emergency shelters to provide homeless services. The Commission will continue to meet and will present periodic updates to the Council. The council's next meetings are held on August 9th and 16th.
The Salt Lake City Council confirmed the appointment of Vicki Bennett as the Director of the Office of Sustainability and Greg Daly as the Chief Information Officer for the city's Information and Management Services Department. Officers, civilians, explorers, and families gathered together to pay tribute to the fallen Dallas police officers at a vigil hosted by the Salt Lake City Police Department. A new housing innovation lab was launched by the city with an introduction to the new Emery Passive House. The house is a model of efficient, innovative, and affordable family housing in Salt Lake City's Poplar Grove neighborhood. The city's overall housing strategy recognizes new homes can be well built with popular design features while still being affordable. The Twilight Concert Series is back for the summer season. Thousands gathered at Pioneer Park to listen to the rhythmic sounds of electronica music from Chet Faker and Katranada. Twilight concerts will be held every Thursday now through September 1st at Pioneer Park. For details, visit twilightconcertseries.com. Transforming Together, a guided dialogue to help strengthen police-community relationships, was held at the Sorensen Unity Center. Salt Lake City Police Chief Mike Brown and Mayor Jackie Biskupski listened to residents' concerns as part of an ongoing effort to transform and bolster police and civilian relationships within the city. A commemorative hike through Immigration Creek gave residents a chance to walk in the footsteps of the 1847 pioneers. Following the hike, the annual First Encampment celebration held at Donner Park offered event-goers an authentic pioneer experience, including music, food, and entertainment. To address national trends of fear and mistrust, Chief Brown is implementing changes on how police interact with the community. The chief is here to tell us more.
Community policing is when you have people living in a community and you have officers that serve that community, them coming together to work on problems, issues in that community. But it's more than just chasing crimes and responding to calls. It's coming together to be stronger as a community. The more a community works with its police department, the more a police department understands its community, the better that community will be. And I'm telling you, Salt Lake City, we're on a very good track under Mayor Biskupski's leadership. When we reorganized, we had a lot of officers in different units that didn't allow our patrol officers to spend the time they needed on the calls as they were serving the citizens of the city. They would go call to call to call all night long. They had no investment, they had no time to sit down and talk face to face with people, to interact and to build that trust. And so we quickly realized we needed to do something. And with that being said, we have over the last year really strived to, number one, give our officers the time and the numbers and the training to go and to talk with people. I realized that we needed a bridge into the communities we served. We needed somebody to tell us, hey, look, you need to do this. You have a blind spot here that you don't know about. And so I went out and I recruited folks from the community. They're not paid, they're volunteers, they're people that live in our communities, that have an investment in our communities, that want to see change. And so those folks come together at least monthly and we sit down and talk. And the charge that I have given them is I want honest, real, raw, organic information and conversation. Don't sugarcoat it. I mean, if it's something the police department needs to hear, if it's something the police department needs to do better, that's what I need you for. And so from a policing aspect, I mean, we should be looking holistically